So, a few videos back, we talked about Motortrends' stunning announcement that the C8 Corvette that they dynoed was making in excess of 550 horsepower at the wheels. This revelation was shocking as the LT2 that drives the C8 is rated at 495 horsepower, and that's at the crank, not even at the wheels. So, of course, this story picked up a huge amount of traction, and with that traction came a large amount of skepticism, which included myself. You see, I absolutely love the Corvette C8, and I have been covering it religiously on my channel for over a year now. I love it so much that I'm going to be buying one because I truly believe GM has something special with this car. But I'm also a realist, and a base Corvette with the standard LT2 engine making over 600 horsepower at the crank just didn't add up. This, of course, was what I summed up in a video over my thoughts on Motortrends' article and dyno numbers. If you haven't yet watched that, I suggest you go and do so now, as I provided some reasons for why I was so skeptical. Nevertheless, Motortrends seemed to have heard our thoughts on their numbers and has followed up with another article that for the most part admits they were wrong. Now, of course, they throw the dyno operator under the bus immediately and never bring up the fact that they uploaded an article that they most likely knew was inaccurate. It did what they wanted. It really did rally up quite a few views, but from a realistic standpoint, most of us knew the truth, and so now we seem to have it. Motortrend's followed-up article is titled C8 Corvette Dyno Test Follow-Up: What Really Happened? Its subtitle being Key Parameters Were Botched, but the C8's Still Plenty Powerful. So from the get-go, they don't hide the fact that their numbers will not hold up for the long run. So let's jump into what exactly happened. It's essentially what I talked about in my last video, and that is that dyno numbers are an imperfect science. They have parameters that calculate the output based on the number it reads from the dyno run. You change the parameters and suddenly you have different numbers. It is certainly more complex than that, but in a simplified version that should sum it up fairly well. Motortrends starts by attempting to save face by explaining they tested a 2020 Ram 2500 that day and the results were in line with what they had expected, so there really was no reason to believe that the numbers the C8 put out were wrong. But you'll see in a moment why that really doesn't make any sense. They continue by saying that they had a tough time believing the numbers that were produced. Herein lies the biggest problem with Motortrend. Why did they not do further testing and analysis before they printed the article? Well, because they knew the original article made for better views, and in my humble opinion, I hate that they did that. I don't think we should completely write off Motortrend, but that does certainly lower our confidence in their validity of their future posts. That being said, they do receive cars long before the public, so we have little to rely on other than their reviews in other publication companies. So as I mentioned, they throw blame at the dyno operator and give the reason that 2 dyno settings were incorrect during their testing. As I said above, true numbers all rely on correct parameters, and we now know that they were not correctly selected. The first parameter was road to load horsepower at 50 miles per hour. It's key to account for friction and aero drag. Motortrends says that they didn't have this number as they didn't have the time to test for it while they were testing their C8 Corvette, so all they did was use it from the C7. I mean, come on Motortrend, we have already seen countless differences between the two cars produced due to their completely different shape and weight distribution. They never mentioned this in the original article, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. To give you all some numbers, they used 12.6 as their measurement from the C7. Chevrolet has actually provided the true measurement, and it's 15.4. Then it gets even better, as they tell us where the major issue came from. In one sentence, that's all they say. They just graze over the fact that the dyno was set up for an all-wheel drive vehicle. I do blame them for not following up correctly on the dyno data, but this blunder falls directly on the dyno operator as they mentioned. So yeah, that would certainly change the performance figures we get from the dyno results. Both of these issues then compute to the fact that the dyno thought the C8's engine was overcoming much more inertia than it really was, which simply computes to a much higher performance figure. The article begins to wrap up with them assuring us that the C8 Corvette is underrated, and I don't completely disagree. Another point I made in my last video is about the stress test that the SAE certification puts on the engine. The way they come to the results is heating up the engine much hotter than typical dyno runs. Heat reduces performance and gives a number that is usually on the conservative side. I don't think it's out of the realm to think a C8 produced between 500 and 525 horsepower at the crank, but honestly, 550 at the wheels, yeah, that just isn't happening with this car, at least not the base version in stock form. Motortrends says they attempted to use other data points they used from highway polls, and even then they never got close to the data that the dyno showed for the results. They did mention something that they found a trend line at 425 horsepower at the wheels just past 6,300 RPM. They said with 15% drivetrain loss, that would bring it up to about 500 horsepower at the crank, but we actually already know the car doesn't lose 15%, as Chevrolet has told us it's closer to 8% drivetrain loss, give or take on either side. Their final point was to use a V-Box to input new measurements, and they came up with even worse results, saying they came up with numbers lower than the SAE figures. So I think it's safe to say at this point, we just need to get several C8s on different dynos and find what the average output rating is. I do think the SAE number is a good measurement to go by, if maybe just on the conservative side. But regardless of all of this controversy, let's not forget what Chevrolet has provided us. This car is truly shaping up to be an extremely special Corvette, and while there may be a few faults in it, it's a true contender in all areas, as the price is less than the total option list for some of its competitors. I mean, with the Z51 package, you get a car that will do 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds, get to 100 miles an hour in around 7.5 seconds. It's not bad at all for a very low price package. It truly is an incredible car and feat that Chevrolet has pulled off. So there you all have it. We now know the truth behind the huge stir-up from the dyno numbers of the C8. As always, let me know your thoughts on what Motortrend has said. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on the last video, and you all have provided a ton of good insight. I did want to finish out today's video with a bit of updated information we have on the Corvette C8 and specifically the high wing option. I've had tons of questions on the high wing option and we haven't had a ton of details. We do have some updated photos. I'm going to throw that up on the video now so you all can see that. And I know a lot of people are up on the fence, I as well, on what I'm going to do. In these photos we can see a red C8 with a color matched high wing option, and they do have the long racing stripes in white. It looks actually pretty good. This isn't too bad of a spec. Kind of fun. It wouldn't be my personal spec, but there you go. Gives you a little bit more information and look on the high wing spoiler. Like I said, hopefully it's photos like this that help you all be able to make the decision you want to make. The other thing I did want to add is GM originally did not allow you to take museum delivery with the high wing spoil option added. It had to be, you could pick it up and then have your local dealership install it, or you just ship it to your local dealership if you weren't doing museum delivery. They now have changed that. If you want to do museum delivery, you could have the high wing option there, so when you pick it up, everything is ready to go. That's actually a pretty nice updated feature that they're doing. I know a lot of my subscribers have been questioning that, and for you all that are interested in a museum delivery and want to pay for that service and kind of the overall experience, you now can have a fully finished Corvette ready for pickup. So pretty cool that they're doing that, and hopefully that helps with making your overall decision. Also, many of you may already be aware of this, but for those of you behind on the news, the Corvette C8 has officially been delayed by the strike, so the first orders for building have been pushed back to the middle of February. Many of the early buyers that are on the forums that I've been watching are reporting that they're getting a status now of 3,000 on their build order with a completion date of 2/17/2020. My dealer still has not gotten to me about my status update, but I should be getting something very soon, and I'll make sure to update you all as soon as I know anything. Thank you all so much for checking out my video today. If you did find it interesting or just helpful, think about hitting that like button, as it greatly supports me. If you are new to the channel, we would absolutely love to have you hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. You all take care, and as always, I'll see you next video.